garden friends. I am here to go through our science kit number 5 with you. So I have a kit number 5 here, and I already took some of the papers out. So I just want to show you this. Our 4th and 5th graders have some extra reading on pollination. This is actually from the Brain Pop pollination activity. So if you want to read it on Brain Pop, anybody is welcome. It's a little more detailed, so I only sent hard copies home for the 5th graders. Let's see, 4th and 5th graders. So, and then this green paper, or some of you might have it in white, but I think I made them most green, gives you instructions for this week's project. So at the top, it says create a pollinator mouth model. Now you have some materials in this bag, but other materials that you're going to want for this project are going to be things like scissors. Let's see, I just realized I didn't put scissors on my table. Let's see. So you're going to want some scissors. And if you're going to do some demonstration after you create your model, you'll want a water bottle with a narrow mouth. And you may want a bowl with just a little bit of water. You don't need a lot of water. And you're going to want a pencil and paper. Now, I would recommend that you get your science journal out, and you can do all of your design in the science journal. That way, you don't have to glue extra papers in there. So, we're going to use a design process that I learned in a training last month by the Bay Area Discovery Museum, and they call it the Think, Make, Try. So it's an engineering design process that they use with students. And so we think about our problem, and then while we're thinking about it, we can do some drawings of some models, and then we create the model, and then we test it. We try it out and see how it works. And we can always, if you see these cute little arrows here on their graphic, if it doesn't do what you expect it to do, or maybe you think of a way to improve it, you go back to the think, what can I do? How can I change it? You make your modifications and you try again. So this is just an iterative process that we can do over and over. It doesn't have to be like one and done. I'd also like to encourage you, if you have other items besides the maker materials that are in your science kit, you are welcome to use things. I've got some Play-Doh. I was thinking I might try and use any kind of construction paper or extra craft materials. Whoop, sorry, I totally just knocked over the camera. Whatever you have available is totally fine to use. Whoops. Look, I'm going to have a cat help me with our video today. Silly kitty. Okay, so reading our instructions, we're going to think about the problem. Pollinator mouths are certain shapes so they can get their food from a flower. They drink nectar, right? So flowers are certain shapes so that while a pollinator visits for food, they also collect pollen from the plant. So the question is, what pollinators visit which flowers? How do they know which ones fit their mouths correctly? So how do they know? How do pollinators like bees, butterflies, flies, hummingbirds, and bats know which flowers are going to fit their mouths? It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. So your first step during the think process is going to be to do some drawings. I want you to draw pictures of some pollinators' mouths and their flowers that you think they might be visiting. So you can ask your adult to help you look up pictures online, or I do have some pictures, so you can always pause the video as I show you these pictures. And you can do your own research. Maybe you have books, encyclopedias, or different books at home that are good resources, and that's great too. Here's an example of a honeybee and a close-up of his mouth. Look, he's got parts right here, and this kind of looks like what we would call a tongue. In a bee, it's apparently called a glossa, Glossa. It's kind of neat. I didn't know that's what it was called either. And these little mouth parts on the side of it are called the mandible. And so the tongue comes out, the glossa comes out from between the mandible parts. So there's a bee if you want to pause on what the bee mouth looks like. Here is a ladybug. Let's zoom. Whoop, I'm about to knock my camera over again, you guys. I'm sorry. Let's see. Check that ladybug mouth out. So the ladybug also has the mandibles. And it also has, let's see, the standard insect, right? It's got his eyes and his antenna. But we're really interested in this mouth part. And I wonder, what does a ladybug mainly eat if its mouth looks like it's going to chew on things? That's interesting. So the bee mouth, whoops, I'm zoomed too far in to compare. The bee mouth, he's got a tongue coming out. But on the ladybug, we don't see that tongue. He's just got chewing parts. So they must, I don't know, I think I would draw a conclusion from the differences in their mouths. They probably eat different things, right? Interesting. Let's see. I think I have a nice anatomical picture here that I found that kind of shows you. I'm sorry, I'm not great at zooming in with my camera. There we go. It shows you all the different parts of a bee mouth. It's so interesting. And see how it says glossa down here. So there's the tip of the tongue. Proboscis, the palp, the maxillae or maxilla. Maxilla is singular, maxillae is plural, right? There's two. And then the mandible, those are in pairs too. He's got two mandible. And the labrum is this piece up here, kind of right underneath what looks like his nose. So as you're making your model, think about what your pollinator eats. So the honeybee, I know, drinks nectar and he has a tongue, but ladybugs, without that tongue, I don't think they're going to be nectar drinkers, right? I wonder if you can think of some animals that also probably use a tongue or something similar to a tongue. Let's see. So here's my think steps. So I drew. Remember when you're working in your science journal to write down the date? And if you can write kind of a title of whatever project you're working on, that's great. So I wrote pollinator mouse. And I drew a bee. I drew like the whole bee, and then I realized, well, I really just need his head, right? So I tried to draw the bee, and after I looked at those pictures, I saw that he's got a mandible and some tongue parts here. And then the butterfly, do I have a picture of a butterfly? Let me see. I was thinking I did, but now I don't see it. The butterfly has a really long, it looks kind of like a tongue. It's called a proboscis. Here we go. I don't know if you'll be able to see this very well. Oh, there we go. Right there, coming out of his mouth parts, it looks like what we would, actually that black part, I'm sorry, is his antenna. Where'd my pencil go so I can point for you? The curled up white piece here, sort of curled up into a little spiral, is his proboscis. And that's what they stick down inside the flower to reach the nectar. So we know that butterflies are nectar drinkers. I wonder if we can think of another one. I thought of the hummingbird. Now I wonder, we know that it's got that real long, narrow bill, right? It's real pointy. So my hypothesis was that if hummingbirds like flowers that are deep and narrow, then their mouths must be long and pointy to reach the nectar. So you can write a hypothesis about any pollinator that you'd like to think about. after you've done a little bit of drawing, what you think their mouths are going to look like. Try and include some of their mouth parts. And you're going to make a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is the idea that you think of to help you test your suggested answer. And it should read like an if-then statement. Like mine, if hummingbirds like this, then their mouths must be this way. So you can develop a hypothesis about any of your pollinators, and then you're going to make a prototype. So this is probably, I don't know, those of you that really love drawing, maybe the drawing part, maybe the think and the drawing is the fun part. But I will say that the making the prototype is also probably going to be really fun. So in your bag number 5, in addition to these instruction pages, we have, whoops, I think I dropped something. A handful of little craft supplies. So you should find a straw, and then this is, we would call this a coffee stirrer, but it is also a really narrow straw. And then you probably only have one clothespin, and some of you may have a really big clothespin. My older students are going to have the little clothespins with a really thin piece of paper. And then you'll have this, this normally would be like a spongy paintbrush, right? So if I think about my animals, my pollinator mouth that I wanted to make a model of was the hummingbird. And I think the hummingbird mostly is going to be similar to my straw. It's going to be long and narrow to fit into a tube flower. And I thought I would do, I had this Play-Doh here, so I thought I would make my little hummingbird head out of Play-Doh. There we go. And put my straw on it. So that's my little example of my pollinator mouth. Now my model is not very complicated. I will tell you, you can make your model as big and complicated as you would like. And again, like I said, I invite you to use any maker supplies you have at home. I would love for you to just have a lot of fun thinking about the different types of pollinator mouths. And you can even expand it into different insect mouths, like a grasshopper isn't somebody we really think of as a pollinator, but a grasshopper mouth. Similar to like a ladybug mouth, I think, too, right? So with my narrow water bottle, I'm going to test. Are we ready for the test? I'm going to test and see. I don't know if you can tell, there's a little bit of water down in there. I'm going to try and see if my hummingbird model mouth will get to the water. And check that out. Boop, boop. It did. Now, if I hadn't put the Play-Doh on the end of my straw, I could have probably actually drank the water with my straw as an example. Now, I didn't make this very complicated. If you're going to make something like the honeybee mouth, you might want to include the mandibles in your model, and so we would have more materials in your mouth model. But there's mine. It's pretty simple, and it definitely works. It's going to like that tube-like flower. So for example, our California fuchsia that we have in our school garden and the sage plants all have kind of a tube flower, and those are some favorites with our hummingbirds. Now, if you're wondering about this piece of paper, why do I need this weird piece of paper? That was in case you thought to make a model of a mosquito mouth. Now, what I had thought you might do is take this paper with some tape. I don't know how easy this will be for me to show you, but I'll give it a shot. I appreciate your patience. This is kind of out of my comfort zone. I know you are all really great makers. Okay, so in my case, I'm just taping that paper down to my table. But if you have a little bit taller of a cup, you can tape your paper to the cup. And then what I'm going to do is, so if I'm thinking about a mosquito or another animal that might have a pointy part to their mouth, right? We think of mosquitoes, they bite and go through our skin. So this paper, my thought was that that paper would sort of pretend to be skin. And the mosquito, if I have a pointy little straw like this, might poke through there. Whoop! And he successfully pierced the skin and got the water. Well, we know mosquitoes like to bite people, so they're drinking blood rather than water, right? So there's another idea for how you can model an insect mouth. And then you have a clothespin, because if you're thinking about chewing insects, like the ladybug or other beetles, grasshoppers, look at that. Does that look like they might be a chewing insect? Oh, I forgot I taped the paper down. I was going to try and move this out of the way because I think the paper is making the camera be funny. There we go. Can you see? All right, that kind of looks like it's going to bite something. Huh. That's really interesting. So I think if an animal is biting, its primary food is probably not going to be nectar, and they're just sort of accidental pollinators because they climb around in our plants. And then the other idea with the sponge, this is sort of like if it has the kind of tongue rather than sucks, it sort of laps up the liquid, the nectar. So you can see how that sponge will absorb some of the water. Let's see. There we go. So those are some of the ways you can use these components when you're making your pollinator mouth model. I would love to hear all about whatever ideas you have. You do not have to do exactly what I just showed you. Those are just to give you a couple of ideas on how to get started. Be sure and document everything in your science notebook. And I would love to see pictures of your models and of your notes in your notebook, so you can upload those to the Google Form.